So we begin with our usual prayer for teacher-student. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahe Tejasvinavaditam Astoma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we work together with great energy. May our study be illumined. May we not unnecessarily cavil with each other. Peace, peace, peace beyond all. So this is a Vedanta Series question and answer. And so I'll mute my microphone so that you can formulate any possible questions that you have. And then you can relay them. And I see I have one message in here. How can we feel God's love for us? It can be easier to love God, but much more challenging to feel and receive the love. Let me reread this question. How can we feel God's love for us? So that's the first part of the question. And then there's a commentary that goes with that. It can be easier to love God, but much more challenging to feel and receive the love that God has for us. So I'm going to resort to a few definitions of what we mean by love. Of course, love is very difficult to define because it's an internal feeling and it has no quantity. The only thing is that it is a qualia, that is a subjective experience that we feel. And every individual that is from a mammal onwards, let's put it that way, will feel the impact of a relationship. That is, there's a nurturing desire in all mammals to love and be loved, and we have no idea about the relationship between a chicken and an egg, for example. But there's no doubt that there's a nurturing aspect to the human psyche. There's a human need to be nourished and nurtured. And this felt need is often called love. That's one type. If we just use this as a model, we can see that love is a non-demanding thing. When we talk about love in the spiritual sense, love of God, it's a non-demanding love. Now, often there is in religion petitional prayers, Lord, give me this, give me that. And so it's not entirely non-demanding, and yet it's still valid. Valid in the sense that if you are a small child, then for small things, you'd naturally tug at the mother's skirts and say, oh, I want this, I want that, please give me this, please give me that, knowing that the parent has the capacity to give it. So there's no harm in doing this. But in the Vedanta philosophy, we have a much broader view, and we can say in the practical devotional sense, we may not want to bother God so much. And behind that is a profound philosophy that says that all our needs are fulfilled. We could easily have made our opening prayer, that peace prayer, about fullness. Purnamadam, Purnamidam Purnat Purnamatuchyate Dachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamaya Vashishtati, that everything is full. This is full, that is full, referring to this universe and beyond. And you can't add or take away anything from it. And so there has to be maybe a realization that there is nothing defective in this world. And that means that desire itself can go away because everything is fully provided. And then it leads to the question, who or what is the provider? And something that is freely flowing without demanding any return is surely the basis of love, so that we love God because God is lovable. And is the only entity that we can rely on and have full faith in, that we are sure will provide us with the best, even if it doesn't look like that sometimes. A judicial parent will often give a child something, let's say, for example, medicine, and the child doesn't really like it because it doesn't taste very nice. Nevertheless, it's good for them. The child may feel restrained and restricted in their freedom because they're not allowed to go too near a fire. But it's for their own good. And so to make any sense of any kind of relationship with a loving God involves the certainty that we are fully protected and that we are nurtured and loved. And the evidence of that is because God is not a bad investor. And God digests your food, and the Bhagavad Gita very beautifully puts it that I am this digestive fire. I digest the 4 kinds of foods. And so these 4 kinds of foods, we can easily classify them, but it's not about food. It's about an investment. And further, we know that we are individuals with certain individual talents and skills and abilities. And that's part of the investment. And even if a person is on death row and is given a noose is put around his neck or her neck and destined for a hanging, still God doesn't say, let me cease growing the nails or the hair or digesting the remnants of your last meal. On death row, they give you a last meal. I have no idea why. It just seems pointless. Nevertheless, that's how it is. A sumptuous feast, you're allowed it, emphasizing the material side of what is seen to be life. So, what is God? God is so many things. A life giver, a loving entity, a good investor, and not demanding any return for it. It's not the kind of God of theological religion. It's not the kind of God of childhood understanding that says God is a parent that will reward you and punish you, something like that. It is all infinite love. And every devotional religion, or every religion that has this devotional aspect, will declare that God is love. Not that God is loving, but God is love itself. An undefined kind of resource that gets poured out, not just in your own breath and in the capacity to digest food, but in everything that moves and lives. And St. Paul has that phrase, in him we move and live and have our being, something like that. In other words, we don't have to think, where is God? Because wherever we look, and the capacity to look is there. These questions are raised in the Kena Upanishad. What is that? Knowing which, we can know everything. And the answer is very curious. It amounts to the eye of the eye, the ear of the ear, and so on. It goes on like that. The thing that is enabling this contact with the so-called external world is interpreted by us as an external world. But the truth is, it is nothing more than fragmented God. You remember, I often use this phrase. What we interpret as the world of individual things is really seemingly fragmented God. It looks like that. It seems like that. So how do we connect with this? How do we learn to reflect on this and really get onto it? How do we get this intimate feeling of love? Well, everybody, regardless of your religion or lack of religion, everyone should take the time daily to retire to a quiet spot for meditation. And during that period, the person should turn their thoughts to God, whatever that God is, God as love, and consider their understanding of this being that we call God, and search out a deeper understanding of the nature of spirit and its formations. And so a person should be careful not to take any of their ills or other problems in this context. You shouldn't take on your individual personality interpreted by you into this meditation. Because that particular period is set aside, is dedicated, it's consecrated, you might say, to thinking about God and also about the divine glories, God's universe. We get to God and God as love by seeing the loving expression that we call nature. And often we think of nature as trees and flowers and so on. We don't often include ourselves in this, but we are a part of it. If we are sitting in a cell with 4 walls and nothing else, and we cannot see out, still we can observe our breathing, still we can observe our blood flow and our heartbeat, still we can observe what the skin feels like. In every aspect of what we interpret as the human being, we can connect with. But also outside the body is space. And there's every reason why monastic cells are called cells. Prison cells are named after this. That is, small cubicle or something, an isolated part. The meaning of monk etymologically is mono, yourself, alone. The idea of monastic communities, yes, that's okay. It's to support being alone. And being alone requires not just alone, but also to take advantage of the stillness and silence that goes along with it. And we have gotten used to being surrounded by a lot of noise, a lot of people. We've gotten used to entertaining the mind with a lot of traffic. And all of this takes us toward the outside. Meditation is an opportunity to connect with the inside. And so, as God is the mind and soul of every individual, it's possible for all of us to have our attention tuned into what we might call the internal dimension or the kingdom of heaven within. And we can there receive all the divine messages and assurances and benefits of one infinite love and become a recipient, just to sit there and receive. And we can imagine it, but imagination and feeling can often be the same. How do we get a feeling? First of all, we imagine it, we visualize it. And what we call grace, which is a kind of flow, we receive in these particular periods of this meditation. Meditation, prayer, becomes tangible to us in the fulfilling of our so-called human needs, automatically without our asking. And this is the evidence of love. And this gives us the tangible feeling of love. And if we don't open our consciousness as a recipient of spiritual understanding, then we shouldn't be surprised if we don't experience spiritual good in our daily living. So there's no other way to open our consciousness, actually, because we need to do that and to open ourselves to the realm of internal soul or spirit. And the only way to do this, to have this intimate connection, is through meditation. There is no other way. And meditation and prayer we can use synonymously. Contemplating the things of God, contemplating the glories. So there's we can make an internal prayer about it that will keep in perfect peace, maybe something like that. The mind is stayed on thee. When we tune into this infinite, invisible, then we feel all the things that we're looking for and haven't found. Peace, peace of mind, settlement, the feeling of being nurtured, the feeling of being loved. And all through our day, in that way, if we do this in the morning, our thoughts are centered on the activities of our human experience. There's no doubt on things like domestic issues or duties or work, earning a livelihood, or social and community affairs, and sometimes even on the greater affairs of national importance, things that are going on concurrently in our national affairs that affect society. All of that all of these components are what we call our world. So the question is, isn't it natural that at some time during the day or evening, we take time off to retire to our inner consciousness, away from all this buzz, and retire to what we might call is the inner sanctum of God, or the God's sitting room. And there we can then dwell on the things which are not the things we have categorized as important to us in daily activities. And take a break from them, take a relief from them, and take our consciousness and center it internally. And of course, above everything else, we should develop the sense of receptivity, as the question has mentioned, to be receptive to the flow of love and the divine presence that is here. And so that we become ever more aware of the actual presence of God here in the internal dimension, in the holy temple, if you will, of our internal consciousness, in the secret, sacred place of the divine origin of things, the Holy of Holies, we might describe it as, our very own inner consciousness, the source of our consciousness and the source of everything else, even the external activities. And it is there that we will receive not only love, but we'll receive illumination, we'll receive guidance, we'll receive wisdom, we'll receive spiritual power, everything that we are looking for in another way, in another interpretation in the external world. In the external world, we're looking to know things. In the external world, we're looking for some kind of guidance. We're looking for some kind of satisfaction. We're looking for enjoyment, and we're looking for power. And all of this, in the subtle, deeper way, we get in meditation, in the quietness and in confidence. We find our strength. So it is very important to learn to allocate sufficient time to sit and to feel this dimension. And we do this by reflecting on all the glories, and even in the day, by reflecting on all the glories. Today's thought I put out was reflective of this. We take walking for granted. We take leg movements for granted. And when we now slow things down, I once saw a film as a kind of, it was a film based on a Buddhist monk, and he was moving extremely slowly. And if you watch the film, you can't even see the movement. That is how slow it is. We're often walking about so vigorously and so quickly. There's a time and place for that, no doubt. But there's also a time and place to be mindful of bodily activities, of the flow, the current that is flowing through the legs to make them move, or the current that is flowing through the breath that is evident in the sound of breathing and the sensation of breath. And all of this mindfulness is a kind of prayerful meditation, because it's all attributed to that flow of love that is flowing through everything. So in this way, we can learn to listen in these moments to the still, small, sweet voice within us that we might call the Spirit of the Divine. And this opens our consciousness to the immediate awareness of spiritual good. And spiritual good is the same as pure love. And so we are filled with divine energies of spirit. We are illumined with the light of the soul in these moments. And we are refreshed with what we might call poetically the water of life. And we are fed what we can call poetically with the food which doesn't perish, the bread of life in Jesus' language. So the spiritual food is never rationed, it's never cut off, it's never denied, it's never withheld to those people who learn to meet this divine self or this God, as devout worshippers would have it, in the temple of their own being. And so we learn to connect with love when we are recipients of the grace, which is always flowing. It's never denied and never stopped. It's not like human love, which is principally love of our own self, and conditioned and bargained. I love you only if you love me. If you don't love me, then I hate your nose. Something like that. And a series of useless diversions of our attention into plotting revenge or any of these other reactions that we may have, that we think will work or that are just spontaneous from the gut, impulsive. Instead of that, we have to get used to this flow of love which is always there and which is available for connection. As Sri Ramakrishna said, the wind of God's grace is ever blowing. All we have to do is connect to it. We have to set our sail and allow ourselves to be carried on. That's the secret. So to receive this grace, we really have to spend time away from what we might call the world. We have to retire from the world of sense, just even for a moment, and learn to silence the material senses that will naturally trap us and pull us outward. And we have to have an audience, a hearing with God, a kind of intimate meeting with that. We must become that supreme, intimate God, personal God, should really become felt as a living entity, as a living reality, as an actual presence. And we shouldn't stop until we feel the actual divine presence. And it's not difficult, because every aspect of our sensation is an expression of this divine presence. If you want to put it like this, it's an expression of a holy energy or holy Shakti or Holy Spirit within us. And it can only be when we have learned really to sit and be a recipient, to meditate, to tune our mind into the glories of the divine, to pray sincerely without any sense of self-interest, and to contemplate the glories that lead us to this, and to contemplate the actual sensation of love that we feel at that moment in time. And so it is through this meditation that we become aware of the presence of this intimate, personal God, which the bhaktis so talk about and so praise and sing about and become enthused about and feel a flow of divine energy, energetic love going through irresistibly. This awareness can remain with us from the morning meditation throughout the whole day and also the night as we go about our normal, so-called normal human existence. It need not stop. The continuous flow is there and can be felt. And the awareness enters into our very experience and our every experience. And it prospers also every endeavor it flows through and makes things easy for us. So that life is not a struggle, we find an ease about it. Because we have chosen an easy way, we have learned to let go, because feeling love and loving in return requires a let go attitude. It requires a let go of our small petty self-interest, let goes of our small identity of egoism, our tiny, tiny dot in the vast space of atoms. So I don't know how, I think there's something like, it's estimated 10 to the power of 40 atoms in the universe. Somebody calculated it necessarily in the observable universe. We have to point this out. And what are we there for? As small, not even a dot in the whole scheme of things. If we take it like that, if we take it in a different way, we say, I am the universe itself. The awareness enters into our very experience and prospers every endeavor. And this consciousness of this presence of this divine, well, what we might call the infinite invisible, it's a term I have borrowed from Joel Goldsmith, is a light for our feet and for our activities. It's a guiding star for all our hopes or our aspirations. It's the present that goes before us to make the crooked places straight, effortlessly, just opening up. You see the story, biblical story of the Red Sea, which now maybe researchers are discovering might be the reed seed, the seed of reeds, and how it just parts. So our way should be like that. As we walk our way, things should just open up before us unexpectedly, in a sense, unexpectedly. Expectedly in the sense that we will never be surprised by it. How unusual things come into our space to facilitate our movement forward and fulfill all our desires. And so this making the crooked places straight by itself, it makes us understand and appreciate things which are outside ourselves, so-called things which are inside ourselves, and we become appreciated also by others. And so on waking up, for example, in the morning, and preferably before we even get out of bed, having stretched and yawned and opened the eyes, because the person who normally does it is on holiday, I suppose, just a little bit of fun. We really need to turn our thought to the realization of this unity of existence, our own existence. You know, this existence of unity, that I am that universal presence. There's only oneness which is here. It should become second nature. And everything belongs to the divine. And that this state of consciousness that we call sleeping or dreaming is really an expression of the one consciousness. This we find in endless passages in the Upanishads, emphasizing this three states of consciousness. One Upanishad being absolutely dedicated to this subject, called the Mandukya Upanishad, 12 stanzas, 12 verses. And so to awaken out of the dream state in a dreamy sense and awaken nicely, but always retaining this consciousness. I'm the witness of these three states. There's a unity behind everything. And then what is this expression of consciousness? We start off with thankfulness. Thankfulness because we are loved, not for what we do, but for who we are. And that even this place on which we stand, to quote a biblical quotation that the burning bush of God said to Moses, the ground on which you stand is holy ground. Why do we take off shoes? You know, taking off the shoes in a house is not just an Irish thing because of the weather, but it is an Oriental custom. When we say Oriental, from Middle East onwards. And because the ground on which you stand is holy ground. Why do we take our shoes off in a house? Because the house, whoever's house it is sacred ground. It's the temple of God. It's where God lives. And so to have a shrine as the heartbeat of your home is a necessary thing. And a reminder of the heart of this home, we can light a lamp morning and evening. We can keep it burning as long as we want. And so there are meanings to all of these biblical and scriptural statements that also can be a subject for our contemplation. But overall, we have to gain this conviction of our oneness with the source of love. Not only go to, I am loved and I love in return, but to also go beyond it to the principle of love itself. Because if you say God is love, and you also say that at the bottom, I am that, then you are one with this universal life, and you're one with this universal consciousness, and you're one with this universal love. And so it's not just to feel love of God, it's to go beyond that, to feel the infinity of this goodness and this love and this God within you. And that is the evidence of your oneness with the infinite source of your own being. And so as soon as you begin to feel a kind of stirring inside you, kind of sense of peace or a surge of divine life, then you can get out of bed, for example. You can make your physical preparations, washing, showering, whatever it is. You can prepare yourself for the day. And before leaving your home, then you should learn to sit down and you should ponder your own oneness with this source of love. And you'll find then that you become loving. Whatever you contemplate on, whatever you meditate on, this is the rule, comes to you. If you think that God is the source of strength, strength comes to you. If you think that God is the source of peace, peace comes to you. If you think that God is love, love comes to you. If you feel that God is a divine dancer and player, then playfulness comes to you. If you think that God is the supreme trusting one, that God is your refuge, then fearlessness comes to you. And so we always have to understand, and maybe you picture always that the wave is actually one with the ocean, and we are simply a wave that has misidentified themselves as an independent wave with folded arms saying, nobody can resist me, I will resist every other wave. The wave is one with the ocean. It's indivisible, inseparable from the whole ocean. This we have to really, really entrench in our understanding. And all that the ocean is, the wave is. And all the power, all the energy, all the strength, all the life, and all the substance of the ocean, they're expressed in every single wave, in every single molecule of water, actually, within the wave. And the wave has access to everything that lies beneath it, to the whole ocean. For the wave is really just the ocean. We use this analogy all the time. And yet, we have to repeat it time and time again and understand it and identify ourselves with what is beneath the wave. And the substance is only one. And the name and form varies. But the wave is inseparable and indivisible with that oneness. So if we use this analogy again and again, we have to say that there's no place where one wave comes to an end and the next wave begins. It isn't like that. That oneness of the wave, the ocean, includes the oneness of every wave with every other wave. And so love is a spontaneous thing because there's only one thing there. It's not an alternative position. It's not something that is optional. It is something that is naturally required because there is only one thing. That is the basis of pure love. And we have to come again to Swami Vivekananda's definition of what is love, and he puts it out in a threefold way. By now you're familiar with it. That the characteristics of love means that there is no rival in it. There's no reward in it. There's no gain in it. And there's no fear in it. These are the three evidences of pure love. Many religions will insert the opposite of this and know this to be false. It cannot be love. You cannot have simultaneously a God that says, I love you, you are my child, and I am love itself on the one hand, and then say, however, if you don't obey my laws, then you'll end up on a barbecue with you as the food on it, as the victim of it. These are just childish concepts, which no doubt, as we mature in spiritual life, we outgrow. So your oneness with universal life constitutes your oneness with every expression of this life. And your oneness with divine consciousness expresses this oneness of the whole idea of consciousness. And your oneness with this love will give you a sense of bliss, coming back to the understanding that you are life, your existence, you are light, your consciousness, and you are love, that is your bliss. That is your own nature. And to immerse yourself in this ocean really is love. It begins with love of God, independently as a loving, flowing manifestation of grace, and ends with, oh, this grace, these waves of grace are actually parts and manifestations, waves, if you will, of the ocean. And I am the ocean, I am that love. Realizing this makes you loving. It makes you a kind of bubbling, overflowing pot of love that manifests to everything and all around you, and transforms what we regard as the scenes in front of us. And as the infinity of that being, that love surges through you to bless everyone who you come into contact with, regardless, without any judgment. Then we have to remember that the infinity that we call this divine or God is surging through every single individual on this earth and in this whole universe, whole observable universe and beyond it. No one is sharing anything with you that is of their own, whether it's criticism or whether it is praise. But all of that speech, even, you see, somebody talks against you. Well, that's okay, but regardless of what comes out of the person's mouth, the capacity for speech is a wondrous thing. Is this not evidence of an investing, loving God within you? Yes, of course it is. So this is a wonderful subject. See, I don't have any alternative. What is the alternative? Well, the alternative is abrasiveness, causing friction. And even the most unpleasant tasks and the most unpleasant things that we face, when we introduce this ingredient of love, it has a transforming effect. Even a smile will have a transforming effect.
I was also curious about the bonds that are carried through the lives. I don't know if that's, I was kind of curious because we come in touch with different people and we form certain bonds. And I was curious if that kind of experience carries on somehow.
Well, I did mention that, of course, I quoted from the Bhagavad Gita, and I mentioned also, I don't know if I quoted or not from Kathopanishad. Anyway, I can quote from it again. So you see, there's a passage that's particularly and very briefly deals with the subject, which gives us some clues about what happens and why it happens. And of course, the whole understanding of rebirth or reincarnation, the same thing. I had a small discussion with somebody, and I used the term reincarnation because I mentioned that one of the principles of the Vedanta will be the understanding that the universe runs on the basis of causality. And then, having delineated 5 principles, the person said, yeah, but you missed out one, and that is reincarnation, or sorry, not reincarnation, rebirth. And then I mentioned reincarnation and said, no, rebirth. thinking that reincarnation implied something to do with our avatar, God incarnating. And of course, reincarnation and rebirth is exactly the same term. Incarnation means birth. And so, just logically speaking, I mentioned various alternatives. But the Katha Upanishad is quite explicit, although it's brief. Hantata idam pravakshami guhyam brahma sanatanam yata cha maranam prapya atma bhavati gautama. He says, and when I say he, this is a dialogue between the Lord of Death, Yama, and also Nachiketa, the inquirer, on behalf of us all. So he says, well, I'm going to explain to you the mystery of this oneness that we have just described. And here we can call it Brahman, the Brahma Sanatanam, the eternal. And also how the soul fares after reaching death. Soul means all the gathered experiences that we have that urges us forward. And a key component of that will be the bonds we form out of desire. And those bonds will continue. So if I had a connection with somebody and I desire for that connection to remain in order to fulfill maybe an episode of a drama called life, then that continues, like episode 2, if you will. Episode 1, episode 2. And so we can say that yonim anye goes on like that. Some souls enter into a womb for embodiment, and others enter stationary objects. Stationary objects, according to their deeds. Their deeds are their actions are the result of their impulses, their will, their desires. And according to their thoughts, because in humans, their desires are expressed as thoughts, and their thoughts and desires are expressed as actions. And so, of course, the Upanishads always insist on the independent reality of the Supreme Self, what we have just described as this oneness, this ocean. And they also affirm the reality of the individual soul, however, because we can't say that we are living in a non-existent condition or non-existent soul, and the bonds seem to be to us real. We feel the bondage. We are free, and yet we feel bound. This is a curious situation. This is called ignorance. Ignorance is we are free and we don't know how to access our freedom because there's a feeling of being bound. And so the law of karma, a causal law, cause and effect, sowing and reaping, if you will, that we are born according to our deeds is assumed in this. And Shankaracharya gives a commentary like that. And he says that person goes on to say, this is the dialogue continuing, that person who is awake in those that sleep, shaping desire after desire, that indeed is the pure, that is Brahman, that indeed is called the immortal. In it all the worlds rest and no one ever goes beyond it. This truly is that. This is a very, very important approach and understanding of what we call the causal law. We can stand outside it and observe the comings and goings, observe the causal effect, using the same analogy that we used earlier of a wave in an ocean and waves in an ocean. So there's that static expressing entity, that static expressing oneness that here in the Upanishads is called Brahman, and that we can also call the deep ocean and the oneness of existence. But the wave comes because it comes a desire, and it is a desire from the ocean itself to perpetuate the drama of the waves. And so naturally, part of that desire, every part of the desire will be reproduced and will be the cause of the momentum of the wave. And that means that we can produce in ourselves either a stormy existence, or a peaceful, calm interplay of waves. And it is entirely dependent on our own thought. But it is an expression of this one ocean, this one essence of love and existence. So kamam is the words used. Desire after desire, really objects of desire. Even dream objects, like objects of waking consciousness, are due to the Supreme Person, says Shankaracharya in his commentary. And even dream consciousness is a proof of the existence of the self. So again, we come to these stages of consciousness, different stages of consciousness. So if we have a desire to be connected and not to be disconnected, that desire itself goes through and reproduces all the bonds. And we can say bonds in a general sense also. So all the environmental conditions to fulfill, like a drama, you see. What is the next chapter we want? Sometimes people wake up from, sometimes we wake up from a dream. Not people, we ourselves wake up from a dream. And the dream seems to be in the middle of something. And we want to know, well, what is part 2, please? What is the second part of our drama? It doesn't seem to be complete. Then we go back to sleep a little bit and ask the unconscious mind, okay, can we have an ending, please? It's unsatisfactory. You can't leave me hanging. So the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad will tell us about, among others, will tell us about the different states of this one ocean, which we call the self, the internal self. And it starts off with a question, see, what is the self? Which is the self? Is it the person here who consists of knowledge among the senses, the light within the heart? Or he remaining the same, wanders along the two worlds, seeming to think? See the word, seeming to think, seeming to move about. So Katama Atmiti Yo Yam Vijnanya Mayaha Pranishu Hridayantarayami Antaryatihi Purushaha Sasamana San Ubo Lugav Anu San Shatariti. See like that. Jadativa Lilativa. Sahi Swapno Bhutva, Swapno, dream, or the other state of consciousness. Imam Lokam Anti Karavati Mrityo Rupani. Which is the self? The person here who consists of knowledge among the senses, the light. Which is it? Which one is it? And then it goes on to say, he remaining the same wanders, as it were, like a swan, along the two worlds, seeming to think, seeming to move about. And he, on becoming asleep, getting into dream condition, transcends this world in the forms of death. And then it goes on, truly, this person, when he is born and obtains a body, becomes connected with what we might call the evils, in other words, the ignorant scenarios. When he departs, or the causes of pain, when he departs on dying, that one leaves all evils behind. And truly, there are just two states of this person, the state of being in this world and the state of being in the other world. And there's an intermediate third state, that of being in sleep, that is dream. These two things, waking and deep sleep, and in between, an intermediate state of dream. And by standing in this intermediate state, one sees both these two states of being in this world and of being in the other world. Now, whatever the way is to the state of being in this world, having obtained that way, one sees both the evils of this world and the joys of the other world. And when he goes to sleep, he takes along the material of this all-embracing world himself, tears it apart, himself builds it up. He sleeps, that is, he dreams, by his own brightness. That is the internal brightness that is always illuminating and shining. But his own light, by his own light. It's like you have an internal light that beams, and in one direction with one sense, it's called the waking world. Another sense is called deep sleep, and in between, dream. But it is his own light that is shining. And so this is an answer, by the way, to a dialogue, a series of question-answer sessions in Gargya and Yajnavalkya. And so it's his own brightness, his own light. Your own light shines in this way, in these multiple ways. In that sense, in that state, the person becomes self-illuminated. But you see, in a dream state, there are no objects. And in this, Brihadaranyaka Upanishad uses the example of chariots. There are no chariots, there are no animals to be yoked. There are no events in the dream, you see. There are no roads, but he creates, he projects, in other words, from himself, like projecting onto a screen as a movie. The chariots, the animals to be yoked to them, and roads. There are no joys, there are no pleasures, no delights, but he creates all of these scenes, all the scenes. He himself, you yourself are creating them. And so it goes on. So, and on this, there are the number of verses, continues the Upanishad. Having struck down in sleep what belongs to the body, himself sleepless, looks down on the sleeping senses. And having taken to himself light, he goes again to his place, the golden person, the lonely swan, the one spirit going through. Now, I leave that off there only to illustrate that this whole phase of waking dream and dreamless sleep is exactly what we call reincarnation. We take the components from the waking world and we take them across to the dream world, and by our own light, we display them in different combinations. And then we go into the deep sleep. And so, in a sense, it is the desire and the components of this life that we call our waking life that carries forward into a rebirth, because all the causes are there and all the effects are there. And the important thing is that it is by our own light. Now we have a different view. It's not about reincarnating. It's not about taking the bonds across. It's about using our own light of pure consciousness to display the different scenes that we call, unfortunately, a rebirth or a reincarnation. My standard answer, do you believe in incarnation? No, I don't believe in this incarnation. I believe that there's a display of light that is there, and that we have the capacity to decide how will we display it. And so the fundamental desires that we have, including the bonds that we have, get reproduced in this way to complete the drama, to complete the cinema scene in the movie. That's really what has happened. So we have to look at this other way of looking at things instead of seeing a linear thing, So there's this life, and then there's a reincarnation, and so it goes on. We can also look at it in a circular way. We have to get out of that. And it's not that we get out of it. We were never in it in the first place. That component has to be also emphasized, this oneness of existence. So we have to take it into the context of these three states of consciousness, not just I am born here and I reincarnate there. Give us a different dimension on it, different approach on it. So with that, we'll finish off. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be on all.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swami.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you.
Om